Here I'm working with a roll of maple veneer edge banding, and you'll notice that I'm taking it from the center of the roll, and that's the way you'll want to do it if you're working with it freehand like this. I never start putting a piece on directly from the roll. I always measure it a little bit longer than I need to before I start putting it on. So I just snap it off to a rough length longer than I need, and then I trim the end off with a pair of scissors to make it flat and square. There are a couple of different tools that you can use to heat up the edge banding so that it'll stick. And the first is a heat gun, and the second is a regular clothes iron. I prefer to use a clothes iron. I find that it works a lot faster than the heat gun. The thing about using the iron is that it applies pressure and heat at the same time while you're moving it across the veneer. The heat gun, on the other hand, doesn't apply any pressure, and also it can scorch the wood if you're not careful. I've got the iron set to a maximum setting and no water in there. You don't put any water in the iron when you're doing this. I'm running it along the edge banding, pushing it in as I go. I'm also tilting it so that it puts more pressure on the edge of the edge banding to make sure that that's really well stuck on there. So after I'm happy with what I've done with the iron, I'll smooth it out with a block of wood. You can use a J-roller for this, but I prefer to use the block of wood because it applies pressure exactly where you need it. Whereas if you're not careful with the J-roller, it can break the edge that you need to trim off after. After the edge banding's on there, I need to trim it off. There are a couple of ways you can do this. One way is to use a router with a flush trim bit. I really don't like that way. Even though it's faster, the router bit gets gummed up really quickly. And if you're not careful and rock the base of the router, you run the risk of cutting into the cabinet. My favorite method is to use a plane iron that I've taken out of the plane. It's really helpful if the plane iron itself is not razor sharp. It should actually be a little bit dull. It should still cut, but it shouldn't dig in when you're blading it across the surface like that. I find the best method is to go back and forth like that in a sawing motion, and that usually stops it from following the grain and splintering in. After I have the excess cut off with the plane blade, I make another pass, but this time I use it like a scraper just to get anything else that might be sticking out. And then the final step is to sand it. I like to take a piece of paper and pull it up and down across the edge. The paper will get loaded with glue. That's one of the drawbacks of using it, but it has to be sanded in order to blend in properly. Well, anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I'd just like to mention that the thing that I'm putting the edge banding on is my new miter saw station that I'm building over on my second channel. If you're interested in that, there's a link in the description that will take you right to those videos.